So your roughness at 0.8, so make it a little bit wet. So let's go to our test content materials and throw our dark boulder material onto all these things. And our stalagmites, they're looking fine. Our track, we'll want to do the same thing. We need to plug the holes. Alright, we almost need the sun to be lower in the sky, don't we? We need it to be coming in more than it is right now. So let's see. We can accomplish that by changing what? The height angle? So I think that works pretty well. Like we've got our sun kind of coming in there. Doesn't look too bad. The bloom's not too bad. And our kind of base lighting looks like it should. All right. What's the next thing on the list? Next thing on the list is, like, we need some areas that are cooler looking. Like, we need some stuff out in the middle here where we can actually, you know, like, put some plants and other things that will be necessary. Let's make a new folder here. We'll call it doodads. Alright. So what are we going to do with these doodads? We're going to scale them up? Yeah, let's scale them up. Can we even see that? Yeah, that looks alright. It's not tall enough. But... All right, that's starting to look kind of like what we're going for with some of our, you know, stuff going on. It just looks so bad. Oh, this is the worst. Let's make some of these things hanging from the ceiling. Let's see, see if we can make them look not just absolute trash. No, it's gonna look like trash. We need to embrace the garbage. Alright, yeah, sure, that makes sense. We'll just have stuff hanging down that makes absolutely no sense. But that's fine. Everything's fine here. Everything's going just perfectly. This is obviously one of the best assets ever created for gaming. Legendary. It's just, you know, lots of things are misunderstood. This is going to be one of them. Game's done. Yeah, we're finished. We're gonna release actual art as DLC. We're like, oh, you wanted this texture? Yeah, you know it's gonna be extra. Let's just throw a giant pillar in the way, because we can. No, looks like crap. It needs to go obviously 3 feet to the left. This area is just looking kind of empty. I think we need some rocks in it. You know, more rocks. Yeah, it looks like a pile of rocks. Yeah. You know, it's a pile of rocks. So just make a pile of rocks and slap it on the ground. That's how you make art. I'm a master at this. It's a masterpiece. God, that looks so shitty. PS1 3D game? I know, really. God, PS1 had the worst 3D stuff of all time. Like, I remember just everything was screwing around with camera angles, trying to see what in the hell actually you're looking at. There used to be something here. Alright, so we're going to stack up some rocks, because we need a larger pile of rocks. Because we know we need a larger pile of rocks, because reasons. I'm basically trying to put a shelf or something there that I'm going to throw other crap on later. And it looks like the pattern that's looking like it might work is throwing these sorts of things next to these pillars. I use the term pillar and thing loosely because these just all look like we made a cave out of potatoes. Good old potato cave. It's looking alright. This area looks like it needs a little bit of help though. Yeah, the game that I'm thinking about with PS1 and platforming and graphics like this would be Gex, where you're a little gecko guy who makes wisecracking comments. That game is really fun, but also incredibly frustrating. It just seems like these pillars don't look very good unless they got, you know, a couple rocks under them. Oh man, it just looks like a giant rock dick. Let's let's just emphasize that. It just looks like crap. Alright, that looks a little bit better. Alright, let's build that lighting and see what we get. And it's not spelled Gex like that, it's G-E-X. Alright, looks like we got a hole in this rock over here. Well, we got plenty of rocks. Plug the hole. Alright, cool. Let's save and build that again. Yeah, it was a really good game. But God, some of the levels were freaking impossible. That's kind of how some of those platformers go. So, you know, they start off with cool looking stuff and, you know, easy levels. And you're like, oh man, this game isn't that hard. And then like a couple more levels in, you're just like, Jesus Christ, what the hell? You know, some of those difficulty curves just don't make any sense. Alright, so what's the next thing we're gonna throw in here? Let's see if we get those foreground mushrooms. Like, do we have actual... Like, these are just all 2D sprites, right? There's no actual mushroom. I just like that we actually have the physics stuff properly hooked up. So, like... Because I could do stuff like crawl under the mushroom. And we got this puffball thing. Might be able to scale it up. I'm throwing it in the foreground, right? It's like we need some depth of field going on, almost. Oh, that would be interesting. Maybe that's what we do need, is depth of field on this crap outside. Those things aren't going to get lit very well. They also need to be smaller. They just don't look. They just don't look right. We got to use 3D assets. Is what it looks like. I mean, maybe we don't. Let's throw them in there and just say to hell with it. We don't need no high quality. Alright. Well, I think with these mushrooms we can actually do a few things. So just put them all over the place here and see what it looks like. Just tons of mushrooms. Well, if you just ignore them visually, they look fine. Just turn your brain off. Everything's fine. Let's make a new folder, call it foreground. I'll throw all this trash into there. So the question is, how are we going to put together this, like a mushroom sort of thing, right? Let's go crack open one of those test levels that Adam was working on and See if he's got anything in here that I haven't seen that I might want to grab. Just close your eyes and think of it. Yeah. I get that reference. Let's see, he made all these things sculpting the terrain. And are those 3D? Is that part of the terrain? So that's a piece of the foliage? Alright, so we do have a shroom mesh that I can play with. Well, let's go throw it in there. So I'm going to copy this shroom mesh over here. Alright, so we don't have a material for it. So let's make a new material. Let's call it Mini Shroom Mat. And we'll just basically just have a color go straight into this thing. Yeah, why the hell not? Let's just basically turn it into the wall. Let's give it a little bit of emissiveness. Let's see, UV. And we're just gonna, make just an absolutely awful abomination for this thing. Because I don't care about realism. I don't care about much. The texture doesn't wrap. That sucks. Well, it doesn't have to look right, it just has to look weird. Alright, so we'll have, that sort of stuff going on here for no real reason. And we're going to want, I guess, our normals to come in. Well, we don't really have to worry too much about that, do we? We don't need a normal map for this, do we? Or, I mean, we could. Kind of a little bit of roughness on the normals. Do we have a noise normal? I don't think we do. Well, I do at least want a roughness on this thing. So look kind of like that. There we go. That's a mushroom material if I ever saw one. The hell am I doing? Alright, mini shroom is going to need this material. Alright, it's just a little mushroom, right? Doesn't that look like a mushroom? It's just perfect. Absolutely perfect. Alright. And I'm gonna go back to my level. Hello, Sir Resident. It's going well. We right now are in the process of trying to duplicate this scene in Unreal. And as part of that, we are just slowly roughing out the stuff. Like, I am not an artist, I'm an engineer, so I'm basically taking the assets that we do have and I am hodgepodging them together in order to figure out what sort of tools that we have and what we'll use in order to actually create the levels themselves. And so it's really just an exploration of, you know, working with crappy assets. What can I actually make? And then, you know, that way I can basically say like, well, this is all the stuff that you need to make this level. And then we can, you know, go from there. So let's see, if I go to my landscape and I have my mushroom and I throw this out here, you're about to start a 2D game. Well, that's exciting. What kind of 2D game are you going to be working on? Gosh, it's difficult to see. It's with zombies and looting. Are you sure? Are you sure you're not stuck back in 2010? Zombies and looting. There've been some pretty cool games about that. So is it like this thing is just tiny, isn't it? Yeah. I need it to be bigger. Kind of a hardcore permadeath, or it's like DayZ in 2D. All right, there's some stuff to go on with there. Was it gonna be maybe multiplayer? I mean, like co-op multiplayer or like online multiplayer? All right, so there's our little mushrooms. And yeah, those are looking all right. I need to put lights on them though. Confused how I do the realistic characters though. So if it's 2D and you're trying to make online multiplayer and you want realistic characters, well, I mean, your best bet for reference material will probably be some Super Nintendo games, things like that, because they had some more realistic characters on some of those. But yeah, that could be pretty cool. What kind of 2D? Like a top-down 2D or like side-scrolling? Or is it kind of Zelda top-down? Alright, I need to make a blueprint out of this mushroom thing. So let's make a blueprint. Let's call it, it's going to be an actor. And it's going to be mushroom. Yeah, mini mushroom. And this blueprint is going to contain the mushroom. Wondering if you get a 3D model in film animations with the side with a green screen, you know. Yeah, you can definitely do that. So basically what you'd want to do is set up some sort of sprite sheet export for, you know, a 3D object in Maya or whatever modeling package you're working in. You know, render out the frames and then package that up into sprite sheets and do it. That'll totally work. But I think in a lot of modern frameworks, you'd have a better shot if you've already got like a 3D animated character. You might have a better shot just using a 3D animated character and a orthographic projection or something. Because it's actually more of a pain in the ass in a lot of these engines to use 2D assets than it is to use 3D assets. Alright, so we need a point light in here. So, point light. So the light color should be like, yeah, like that. We're not going to use the inverse square fall off. Cast shadows. I don't think we want shadows from these lights. Like these are just, you know, stuff. So let's see. What kind of technology are you thinking about, Sir Resident? Are you going to make it in Unity or Unreal, or are you going to make it in JavaScript or whatever? Unreal 2D? So you're probably looking at Paper 2D and all that. Well, I can kind of go over what we do, which might be similar to kind of what you're doing. Kind of what we do for our 2D stuff is we're working in Toon Boom Harmony to make the characters. Yeah, Paper 2D has some stuff that's not super well done. Like, it doesn't have events that get fired on animation frames, things like that you kind of need. Because, like, if you got a gun or something, you need to fire it, you need to know, like, on frame 5 that you fired it. So kind of what we do for our stuff is we have these animations. Adam will create the character inside of Harmony, and then we render out each frame here, and we've got these rigging objects, kind of like this is the pivot point, and this is the collision box for his head and everything like that, and we can name all of it. So like this is the hit body, so this is like the hit box for his body, and we have that all named and all that stuff. And then we run an export process, like we wrote a little exporter, which will, you know, take your animation and export it to a specific sprite sheet. And Toon Boom Harmony has like a scripting system and a sprite packaging thing. You just have to set it up properly and call it. And then we export it, and we export it. We actually export the emissive sheet, the normals. And then the actual sprite. And those combine together to make the character. And a lot of the stuff that's not super great about Unreal and all that is actually importing those sprites can be a real pain in the ass. So like I've got an import process which actually will import characters, and that'll take this what is the name of this? This is W crouch turn. So, like we've got our texture here inside of Unreal, which we've imported, and you're going to want to be careful about the compression settings. The compression settings by default don't get set very well. The default stuff will leave you with edges that are all fuzzy and shitty. So we use the vector displacement setting, which makes the textures larger in memory, but they don't have little jaggy, horrible things on them. And so we got our sprite sheets, which get hooked up for all that, and then for all the frames, like it works okay if everything is like square. If you export everything into like 128 pixel with squares, you can import them into Unreal pretty nicely. But the way a lot of sprite sheeting stuff works is they don't export stuff as squares. They export stuff, they try to cut out as much as possible. So, his pivot is changing every frame and all that sort of stuff. So you have to do that manually with Paper 2D, and I think they've got a few formats that you might be able to match to import, but I had to just write my own editor plugin for that. So keep them square unless you're willing to go write a whole bunch of code to import them. And Paper 2D also doesn't support very much collision stuff very well. So like on your frames here, you've got your various sprites, which kind of Paper 2D has flipbooks and sprites. These collision objects actually, like if it's per frame collision, which is what we do have, then you'd have to manually like set up all the collision data yourself by hand. It's a real pain in the ass. So just keep in mind that it might be easier to kind of write your own collision stuff on top of it than to use what they have in there, because it works pretty well for some things, but it's not super simple. Yeah, it can be a real pain in the ass. It can detect smartly some stuff, and they also have some ability to draw on stuff. But if you have per frame collision, like I want to shoot somebody in the head, specifically, in the head, because it's a zombie, right? So you're gonna want to headshot them. You're gonna either have to have a different flipbook, with another sprite for the head, or you're gonna have to have a child object, a child component, which has its own child collision data on it. And kind of that's how we do it with our player when we actually play. This the actual Dashkin Entity actor here has on it the flipbook component and an animation controller, but it also has these two paper. I actually made some physics components as children off of it, which actually have, like, if you can see it down here, there's like object type player body and an object type player hit. So there's like a collision box for movement, and there's a hit box for registering hits and all that. And that's all custom, so you're gonna have some issues with that. But yeah, the other thing is the 2D stuff doesn't work very well with lighting and all the rest. So one of the big things you're probably going to want to take into account is for your materials. So for us, we have like the Bitey right here. His material is this sprite material, which is a masked lit sprite. So if you have a masked sprite, that means that, you know, it's not translucent, so it doesn't have like opacity differences from 0 to 1. It's either transparent or not transparent fully. Masked sprites can cast shadows and be shadowed. Translucent sprites cannot be shadowed and stuff like that, so you're going to want to work with masked sprites for everything that you can. Otherwise, the shadows aren't going to work very well at all for you. But other than that, yeah, everything works pretty easily. All the materials are nice and simple to work with. But yeah, you can look it up online pretty easily. But translucency and shadows and all that stuff is a real pain. So if you use masked sprites, though, you'll be fine. Which works real well for everything. Most of the time, the only things you really need translucency on are like explosions, and those things aren't lit anyway, so you're good to go on that. Yeah, I don't think Unreal is doing anything with its Paper 2D stuff. It's not actually working on it anymore, so that's a real pain in the butt. So you're not going to get any help from Unreal with like subsequent releases of it. So if you're not super engineer dude who wants to make tools and stuff like that, just seriously look at the marketplace and find something that works for you. I didn't look at the marketplace because I am a stubborn engineer man and I wanted to build it all myself. Anyway, that's enough rambling about stuff like that. Let's get back to this mushroom. Let's get back to the mushrooms. So we've got a point light. I think I want to scale this thing up. So like 100, 100, 100. And then where's this point light? It's kind of right under this thing, which is what we want. Actually, I think I want the radius to be a little smaller. I want it to be something like that. Thank you for following, Sir Resident. Thanks for your help. Well, you know, like, I'm a developer. I think people should help each other out. So hopefully you have good luck with your project, because making games is really damned hard. It's not an easy process, so. Alright, so supposedly I should be able to use my blueprint here to put a mushroom into the scene. And let's see what we can do with it. If we change the intensity of this light, try to do the green screen animation stuff. That seems like a pretty decent idea. Looks like this point light is not lighting what I would like. Like, it's not lighting all of this. I wonder why that is. And we're actually going to make these things static for these the mobility of this thing. Yeah, it's going to be all static. Hopefully we can get static lighting on this. You can use VR animation stuff. Alright, so I'm not super familiar with all the point light stuff. But it looks like we've got the point light. Now we want no shadows. But I'd like it so this thing doesn't cast a shadow on itself. Like, it shouldn't block the light here, which is just odd that we have these. You really want to do a 2D game with Unreal? Well, the question would be, why do you want to make it an Unreal? Is it the reason we chose Unreal is because of all the cool lighting and stuff like that they've got? And we also chose it because it's a skill that is, I believe, more useful for the industry. Like, you can find more jobs that I want to work at with Unreal 4 as opposed to Unity. With Unity, like, I probably... The blueprints and lighting. Well, blueprints have actually been really cool. I've been impressed with blueprints, and with the latest stuff, they actually will compile out to C++ code if you want. So there's some drawbacks to blueprints. Like, it's a real pain in the ass to, like, they're all binary. So if you want to know, like, what you did yesterday or what the blueprint looked like last week, that could be a lot more difficult. I mean, even if you're using version control, you can't just, go over to one of your files and just be like, well, what did this look like last week? Versus like with your C++, then you just be like, oh yeah, here we go. It looked like this. So I'm confused with why we are getting, I guess the lighting is just defined by the normals. So the normals are going to tell this thing what it should be lit as. So for us to make this thing work, we're actually going to have to make 2-point lights or something like that. Or 4-point lights, and throw them around this thing. Or we can make 3 and kind of fake it. Something like that. We can get it to glow, and then we can change the intensity. So let's see what that looks like in the world. Yeah, I think that's sort of the mushroom effect that we're looking for. Of course, you know, we want to change the light and all that sort of stuff. Let's see, if we change the size of this thing, if we make it like 2 times bigger, doesn't, yeah, scaling this object does not change the magnitude of these lights or anything else. So what I'm going to have to do is kind of make a more complicated mushroom, I think, to actually get this thing working. Like, I'm going to want to make a smart object here where it actually will construct itself, attach a couple point lights, and do that kind of like we did with the sky sphere. So I'm going to have to do stuff. Well, that's cool though. Do we want to go ahead and actually do the work to make this thing more? I think we do. I think we actually do want to make at least one kind of smart mushroom object. Alright, well, I'm gonna be right back and then we'll start doing that.